In the summer of 2024, 12 of the greatest minds in the history of video game development, design, and theory gathered in the woods of Southern Oregon to discuss the modern gaming industry and the emergence of artificial intelligence technology. This is a series of conversations between old friends, old men now, men who have shaped the gaming world as we know it today, and whose innovations will continue to influence how we play for generations to come. Episode 2. The conversation continues with an exploration on interactivity in video game design as a form of art.
My Arthurian story world, and it took about 3 years, and I published it about 1.5 years ago on my website. And bear with me on this statement. I will claim that it is, I have two qualifiers here, that it is the only genuinely interactive work of art. Now, two qualifiers on that statement. One, I define interactive art to be art in which the content, the artistic content, the artistic message lies in the interaction, not the graphics, not the text, not the sound, just the interaction, the algorithms themselves. That really narrows it down. The other qualifying comment is I haven't looked at anything else. So I'm actually hoping some of you guys will, say, oh yeah, well, there was this guy who did something better than Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. You ought to look at it. Anyway, this story world is called Morte D'Arthur. And this is really different. It's about death. It's about the meaning of life and one's purpose in life and the relationship of death to all these things. This is serious stuff. This is not fun at all. It's also rather lengthy. There are 350 encounters in it. It's based on a system of encounters. An encounter is a short story presenting you with a dramatic conundrum and 1, 2, or 3 reactions to it. And you choose which one is best. And these are not the juvenile choices you get in most video games. There are some really tough choices. And the hardest ones come with Merlin, who he's the real meat of it all. Basically, there's an awful lot of stuff happening, and you're having these encounters with people.
I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
Shut up. Go to hell. Jesus.
I don't remember Merlin's name.
You invoked Merlin's name, and this box talks to you. I don't understand.
I'm now more nervous about the boxes.
Well, but he sits still here, so the Wi-Fi is working. Anyway, there are all of these events that are taking place. They're providing a dramatic context. And Merlin every now and then appears out of nowhere and challenges you with a Socratic dialogue where he's asking you some really tough questions. And it took a lot of time composing those dialogues because the choices you're given, there are no easy choices. And they're philosophical problems, and they're really challenging. And yet your answers to his challenges determine the outcome. Now, you don't win or lose this. It's not a game. But there are different conclusions. And what I'll say, and it's pretty clear, although I say it's no winning and losing, 2 of the conclusions are black and 1 is white. You're not winning or losing, just white or black. Anyway, this is serious art, and this represents, I've spent all of my life trying to figure out how to make games a medium of artistic expression. And with Morte D'Arthur, I think I finally achieved my life goal. And so I'm happy now.
Would you describe this as interactive philosophy?
Philosophy, normally the word implies a more intellectual. This operates at a more emotional level. Yes, it is philosophical, but
I think philosophy is prescriptive, and this sounds like it's more discovery than prescriptive.
very good. Yeah. You haven't played it, though.
Just the way you described it.
Well, there's 5 things just like it. No, there's 5 things just like it.
Yeah. Not true. That I know of.
So, it's...
It's on your site, by the way.
Yeah, it's on my website. You just go to the home page. And I will warn you, a lot of people misunderstand it. I keep records. The program is written in a way that every move every person makes is recorded. And so I get a statistical analysis of how people are responding. I've already identified a number of things where everybody gives the same answer. That's got to change. But it's interesting. The vast majority of people who play it last about 5 turns and walk away because it's not fun. There's so many people approach it with the game's Weltanschauung, and they just can't get it. It just goes right over their heads. But I'd say about once a week somebody plays it all the way through, and it takes a while. And about once a month, I get a long email from somebody saying, wow, this really made me think, gosh, I was really upset. And here have been their thoughts about what it all means and how it affected them and so forth. Yes. Yeah, that really, that's the best part of this whole project, reading. These people really think hard about what it all means.
Well, and you're generating emotion. Generating ideas is cheap. Generating authentic emotion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Changing people. I mean,
Yes.
people going through an experience like that are not the same at the other end of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what art is about, right?
Yeah.
It's in the weeds, but like, there could be little things like just progress indicator. Maybe
Well,
at least like there's a thing called
I'm
Imprint
totally
that I
getting
use on my phone, which is all about philosophy,
Right.
and it's not a game, but like just like, hey, you did it twice a day, good job, or that keeps me coming back, and it's stupid, and it's not a game, but it's a psychological thing that makes it come back.
there is a progress bar, but it's only showing you how far you've gone through the 350 encounters.
Okay.
So you can at least say, oh, well, I'm about halfway. God, I've been here for 2 weeks and I'm halfway through.
Okay.
I
Actually,
keep trying to apply that to my own life to keep me motivated. Just like,
So it's...
But Brian, you want to gamify someone's personal voyage of discovery. I mean, that's there's.
I don't think it's getting.
You know how long? Yeah, that's it. I'd say a little, not gamify, but
Yeah.
psychologically motivate them to keep going to get the full.
So obviously, there's a high score list, right?
That would be gamified.
Well, that was what I was getting to. How far do you want to do it? So Chris is saying you have this much more to go. It's like the book. You want to have some idea of what you're letting yourself in for, but high score is too far. That was the question I was going to get at. At what point does the game intrude on the experience, on the purpose or the experience that you're putting together?
Yeah.
Yes, and what behavioral psychology things can you use without making it feel like a game and cheat? Like
I don't know
so,
if you have to. What I find interesting is the mid-20s. So my kids are 25 and 21. And I'm a 21-year-old is a streamer. 25-year-old is the biggest fucking snob of video games I've ever met in my whole life.
using a PlayStation.
It's a she. Yeah, she knows everything. But her snobbery is all about obscure PC games. Every day it comes in like, hey, did you play this from 1993? It's like, no, and nobody else
Awesome.
did either. so they have to. What I like about your game is I could sick them on that game and I might not hear from them.
Chris, the question I've got is, why do you call it a game? Because that feels to me so structured Like that sets up these expectations.
Yeah,
Isn't there
actually,
something-
I try to call it a story world. That's my term for what happens in for the data structure that is interactive storytelling. But I've been in this business so long, the word is pounded into my brain.
I've hit the same thing. You know, I think most of what I've done, what would you call a game?
Yeah,
You know, there's no win lose.
Yeah.
Everybody makes their own goals. Stories come out of it. Yeah, I think we need a more encompassing term for stuff like this.
Both of you guys
two
are
guys-
both of you guys are systems guys.
You two guys always got away with making sims.
Yeah.
To me, it was even before there was a Sim City in your world, you made simulations. That's what I always thought you made. That's what I always thought he made. So for me, you guys kind of got away with it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one of you.
Yeah, the guy on the screen. I thought you guys got away with that in the 90s.
Yeah.
You guys were the two guys that managed to walk outside of that line in that era. Don't come back.
Of course, everybody still calls them games, and
Yeah.
yeah.
what are the new games you played? You know, they're put in this stack of things called games, right?
But I don't remember ever reading any of the marketing materials for the word game.
You
thought
called
you
it
had
software
successfully
toys.
excised it.
Yeah, I think toys is closer.
Yeah, I always thought that was true.
Yeah, that was in the manual for SimCity. The
Yeah.
original SimCity. Well, play is maybe a more accurate term. You know.
Yeah.
Well, back in '81, John Freeman, old buddy, wrote this like little manifesto at the front end of one of his cassette games, and it pretty much said, "What we're gonna let you do is take that John Carter of Mars book and go inside and live in part of it, or Arabian Nights. I'm gonna let you step into that world that you read about, and you're gonna get to kind of live there and taste it for a while." And to me, game has a kind of formal meaning that keeps mutating and is whatever people want it to be. But that idea, so like Pirates, Sid, thank you for that. Dan Button at the time, Danny Barry later, was working with Don. That's Don's story. I let Don tell it. But that made me so happy. And to me, that's the best thing I can say about, personally, someone enjoying my work, is that for a while, I made them happy and they got to live in a world that they wanted to be in. I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but that's, for me, what John Freeman said all the way back there didn't penetrate, and he didn't label it, didn't give it a good name, but embodying a fantasy.
I think that's actually the relationship between story and what I would call play. You know, and they have a symbiotic relationship, right? But they're both educational technologies fundamentally. You know, we only have a limited bubble of experience that we directly, you know, experience, but we have to build a model of the world. And, you know, that model can be more elaborate if I can hear a story from one of you that, you know, you were walking out and a tiger almost got you. Now I know, hey, there's a tiger over there. You know, I didn't experience that, but you told me a story. Play is just kind of taking, like, you might take Star Wars as a story, and now let's play in that. Now I make the decisions. I'm driving the narrative. I have agency in that world. But, you know, and we can do that with, like, little board games or whatever. But they're both fundamentally, the reason we enjoy both story and play is because they're fundamentally educational technologies, and our brain has evolved to enjoy them.
Well, you've also
Narrative is the mechanism that we convey to other people our experience.
Yeah,
So what's going on in the course of play is we're turning play into narrative. That narrative is the transfer device that we hand it to somebody else. What I think is happening on systems like Twitch, when people are watching gameplay, is we're skipping over the language section. They're going direct to watching the experience and not even having they don't even discuss it.
Right. But they're learning. They're learning about that environment.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I'd go even further to say that it's entertainment is all about why we like entertainment is that it's all an evolutionary thing of teaching us how to survive better in a safe way.
Right.
You know, and that's what play and storytelling are all about as well.
That probably is the majority of what we call entertainment too.
And I wanted to connect with your work, which is if you're wrapping yourself in a cloak of something fascinating and engaging, it doesn't necessarily have to be fun. It can be emotionally challenging, or it can be intellectual, like descending into hell and not fighting the demons, but like descending into hell and confronting what life's about and what death's about. That doesn't sound fun, and yet it's the same idea of I've read about this. Maybe I bounced off the class in college, but now I can go live there for a while and give me a more intimate and direct experience.
You're elaborating your model of the world.
Yeah.
So you're actually growing your model of the world.
I did put a lot of stuff into it. This is not classic Arthurian legend. There are no knights in shining armor, no beautiful castles, no damsels in distress. This is actually 5th century Britain. And so I have encounters about people getting soaking wet because they didn't have slated roofs. They had thatch roofs and they leak all the time. And people getting sick, children dying of illness. They had roughly a 50% mortality rate for kids through most of human history. And so I really try to put you into that world, which was a very desperate, ugly place, people just trying to survive. And that's part of the message of the Morte D'Arthur. But Gordon?
Well, I've always thought, though, that the work that we do, if I wanted to boil it down, are fucking with people's heads.
Yes.
The more I can fuck with their heads, the better. And sometimes there's a method to the madness. Sometimes it's just mere diversion, right? But a lot of times there's a message there, whether we intended it or not. There's a message there, and I always wanted us to be intentional.
Yep.
If you're fucking with people's head, fuck with them in an intentional way. I have an intention that I'm putting into this.
Yeah.
To get to to where they walk away from whatever the experience is different than when they walked into it. That's the key.
Yeah, I was just going to say, building on that, is I think fun is a subset of rewarding. What you're talking about is creating something that for some people, not everyone, for some people will be rewarding. Fun is a definition of a subset of what adds up to rewarding. There's other kinds of rewarding that we found, some of which would be called fun, some of which might be called something else. But if people did it and felt good about having done it, even if you're crying at the end of a movie, I mean, the Saving Private Ryan, I've never been able to leave the end of that movie behind. It still gets me every time I think about it.
Yeah.
I can't unsee it. I'm better off for having seen it. I'm like, yeah, I can. But it accepts me. It hurts.
Yeah.
So intellectually, I know I'm better for it. Emotionally, I don't like it.
Yeah.
But it was a different kind of experience. That was not for me. But it was incredibly rewarding in a certain way. But I carry both positive and negative reactions to it, which I understand is part of the reality of everything.
Well,
so I think that's why fun is a subset.
Perhaps those experiences help prepare us for our own direct experiences when someone we love dies. That's one of the most horrific things that happens in your life. And everybody here has experienced it, and we're never prepared. We never know how to cope with that. And so movies like that at least give us some perspective on it. So
the movie that
There are
people have said
religions
is
where that's their whole job.
Pardon?
If there are religions, that's the whole job, is to have a good death. I mean, I don't know if you guys, there's a great George Harrison documentary, and basically the last half hour is him talking about how to have a good death.
Yeah.
And essentially that's the Hindu journey, is to have a good death.
the piece of art, the movie that actually is the simplest expression of game is Sophie's Choice. One of the most brutal things: which child lives and which child dies. And it is, again, it ain't fun for any what.
Spoiler. It was the last Game of Thrones episode too.
I think that's correct. That's why I was choosing. That's why I was choosing it.
There was one in Wing Commander 3, exactly.
Well, you have to build up to that. I mean, that's the end, and the preparation is most of the work in design terms. Yeah. So.
Well, games cannot be the classical definition of great art unless they can handle these issues. I think that's essentially an entry bar with music, with movies, with books, with plays.
That was one of the deeper emotions driving the design of Le Morte D'Arthur. You guys know how long I preached, and all starting in the 80s. right at the beginning, my feeling was games as a medium of artistic expression. And first I preached it, in a very positive, constructive sense, but then as the game industry became more precisely defined and the definition of game became narrower and narrower, and the cement began to set, I started to turn nasty, and I was very frustrated. And in Morte D'Arthur, it has some very subtle and vicious criticism of the game's paradigm. It's not at all obvious, but only if you play it 2 or 3 times will you start to recognize how it condemns the game's paradigm. And in fact, the most ferocious criticism I got from anybody was a dyed-in-the-wool gamer who kept saying, "You don't show me how to win. I need feedback. I need to figure out what's going on inside the game so that I can beat it." And that's exactly what I was aiming at. I feel really good I got that
Keep
guy.
trying. I know you can do it.
Yeah.
I'll teach him.
Chris, you must be excited now, though. I mean, the palette that we're painting games on, and now the explosion of all the indies doing games that are not in the traditional. Sure, there's a lot of traditional interact coming out, but there's a lot of non-traditional, like really. I mean, the experimentation level is even higher than the early '80s.
Yeah, a lot of the stories here today have illustrated, I think.
Yeah.
Well, partly
Yeah.
because the tools are at the point where, it's been said, you just, so many people can make games.
And it's going to go even wider now. You get little games like Papers, Please, right? What was
Yeah.
like that? That was to me like an experience of just getting through. It was like a World War II kind of feeling thing. And now with the having AI help you program and the tools and everything else. I think however many games you've seen come out in the last 10 years, watch out. It's going to be 10x. So I think we're going to see a lot more.
Well, there was a whole generation of kids playing our games 20, 30 years ago who are now grown up making games.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And some of their kids are.
Yeah, that's
Your
Everybody
book.
plays games.
So I read your book. I think
Which one?
for art and science.
Oh.
When it first came out, or second year or so. And mine has, when I find it, I'll give it to you. I have extensive arguments in the margins with you. I have incredible, one-sided monologue arguments. And one of the ones where I actually added a sheet of paper to my book was to argue with you about the designer must be the programmer. You had 4 or 5 pages on the designer must be, and I'm in the business now of I'm creating specialists, and so I'm having a violent argument with you. And what I just was realizing today is the world came back to you. Meaning, all of a sudden, I might have to take that piece of paper and throw it away because it's possible to do what you said then. Meaning, the kinds of things that Rod's been doing are possible today. They were not possible.
Well, I had an experience a couple of years ago. I mentor a Google indie game accelerator, and they bring in, they have thousands of people apply, thousands of teams apply and pick the cream of the crop. So really good people. And so I was in a room, there were, I think, 60 people, 30 teams of 2 people who had come there. And I was giving a talk about creativity and and I used something I learned from Orson Scott Card, where I take everybody on this kind of journey and we come up with something from scratch. And every time I do it, it's totally different. It's great. So this time we start talking about a game, and the game is about was he a cockroach or some kind of bug who falls in love with the worm at the bottom of a mezcal bottle. And he puts on a diving suit and goes in, and there are little sharks that try and get him, but he saves the worm at the end. And the sharks, the only way you can avoid them is because they're all drunk because they're swimming around. And we're having a great time, but about halfway through, I see one team start to talk to each other and start typing. And I thought, I've lost them because they're having so much fun, doing whatever they're doing. That's fine. So I finished this. We're doing some Q&A. And in Q&A, those 2 guys come up and says, "You stole our idea." And they show me running on their phone is that game that they put together in the 30 minutes or so from when we were, and there was a victory condition. There were little hearts that go out when we finally dodge. Oh, it was just amazing. And it just transformed my thinking about what's possible, that they could actually go that quickly. And, obviously it was a very, very simple version of it, but all the elements that we were coming up with in real time, they turned it into a game.
Yeah, what we call programming is not what it used to be.
Well, again, in terms of what people can do, the other important thing is that they actually have a large enough body of prior art. And one of the things that I've probably lectured on the most is, have you read the ludography? Or have you played the ludography? Have you which are the games? And one of the things Bob Bates curates it for the GDU, but we keep trying to make lists of games you need to play, whether or not you want to play, but you need to understand what's going on before. And that's what makes things more possible, including ignoring you can do great original work if you know if in other words you say, this missed, Jane Austen missed, the equivalent of Jane Austen missed the mark, or that forgive me, that civilization is not the ultimate type of game. Pirates is sin. That's okay. Pirates is but in other words, then you can then do an anti-civilization because you know that Sid created a seminal game.
Kids are pretty good. I mean, my oldest easily knows 3,000 game titles and can give you in great detail, because they played those games. They played some of the big ones, but what they play are hundreds of these Steam $3 or $1 range games, and some of them have deep communities with unbelievable, focus on playing those games that are really equivalent to what we had in the 8-bit era. They got a couple 100,000 people playing a game that two guys made in the face.
Right, and that's the difference. You have 100,000 people, so you get the feedback. You get the equivalent of Chris's person who said, "How do I win?" In other words, the people who don't get what you intended, who take what you did and do things you did not anticipate.
Right. Yeah.
And to do that across, and to basically have an audience of 100 to 200,000 who will try it, means that we are getting a much more faster and heavier feedback, because obviously we're connected by the internet and so on and so forth.
And more focused.
I wanted to go back for just a second. First, what I really enjoy about you, Chris, is you're like a philosopher, and you make people think. I remember that early on. Even if I didn't agree with everything you said,
That's the whole.
it didn't matter.
I begin many of my lectures saying, if you agreed with everything I said, if you did not disagree with at least one thing I said, you weren't paying attention.
I didn't know that, but okay, yeah, no, but so I love that part of it, and part of why we're here, and then I'm gonna go back for a second and with Sim City, that was the first game that I remember. So like you said, there could have been others before. We're like, how do you win? Okay, well, you can't, and that truly was an aha moment for me. That was just so fucking alien that I couldn't win, okay? And I still talk about it to this day, about that innovation that happened. And for me, so I do role-playing games. I do one kind of game. I do narrative storytelling games. And part of it is I think when what we're talking about is emergent gameplay. The more we can put those things into our games, we know that people are creating their own. It's kind of that's their version of diving into the universe and figuring out how to do things their way. And it feels very different than we've crafted the story, but it also falls into your conundrums, because what I'm looking for, to me, I tell my writers, we're a big trolley car experiment here is what we are. And I want, when I watch the streamers play, I want to see them agonize over what the right decision is to be made. I want to see them, and I like to see everybody in the comments telling them what to do, and they're arguing about what to do, whether this is the right call. Yeah. I've achieved my job when they are arguing like mad about what the right decision is. And so I am going to check out your stuff, because I love giving people tough moral decisions. And we put NPCs in the group to create the dynamic that people, if they've created a relationship with their NPCs that are with them in the party, they'll rely on their judgment over their own. They'll want to make something. If the NPC goes, well, I don't think that's a good idea, they'll actually listen to them, and I'll put things in the games like, hey, if you go do this really heinous thing, game's going to be so much easier for you. You're going to get a bazooka or a tank or whatever. Guess what? People like to be good people. 90% of the people will not take that path. They're not real people you're killing. They're
Yeah.
computer people.
I had this
But they won't do
exact
it. And so
conversation.
that's all the dynamic stuff that I love, which touches a little bit about kind of the things you guys.
Yeah,
are
20 or
talking
30 years ago, everybody kept talking about how games don't have an emotional palette compared to literature or film.
Yeah.
They just have a different emotional palette.
Palette.
You know, I feel pride or guilt in a game. I never feel watching a movie. You know, I might see a person on screen that's feeling guilty or, very proud of something, but I've never felt it directly except through games.
Yeah, but there's
you want to see a moment of pure, absolute sadness? Watch somebody who lost their World of Warcraft character.
Oh,
They care more about that than
Some of these
child.
comments,
Yeah, frustration and rage are pretty easy to get.
you guys have raised a question in my mind, though, in that we talk about the nudology is now huge. The literature of gaming is gigantic, but at the same time, it's also more precisely defined. That is, we can talk about an RPG or a first-person shooter. You know, we have all of these well-defined terms that, in effect, narrow our freedom. And so, have we gotten better or worse? Has the concrete set in ways that limit us, or are we more open now because it's so easy?
Thank you for listening. Next up, Episode 3 will explore the evolution of audience engagement and technology in the gaming